Hi there, my name is Kelley Cody Grimm,
And I'm Max Grimm.
and we are Creative Actors Lab. What we want to do is just talk a little bit about how you can bring creativity into your everyday life. All right, well, welcome everybody back to another episode of Creative Actors Lab. I'm Kelley.
And I'm Max.
And today's episode is actually going to be about set etiquette. In fact, this past week, I actually had the honor of having two completely different set experiences. One was working on a TV show for ABC, Will Trent. Actually, very cool show. If you have not watched it, it's got some really neat stuff in it and very Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one was working on a short film called Conversations, Untold Truths. And that one, you went from a big network set where you've got lots and lots of people, you've got the costume department, sound department, you've got sets, you've got ADs, PAs, to the smaller production that had 2 actors and then 4 crew members. And it was a lovely experience. Both experiences were pretty good. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, some of the things I've observed doing TV shows, whether it's been on background or just actually being on a show. And then Max has his experiences working on different things. And then just things that you want to do to make people comfortable, examples of what to do, and some of the people that I've worked with who have been absolutely amazing. And then
there's the other one.
Yes.
The others. We'll just call them the others.
The others, yes. Definitely. So, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
Okay, I will say this. I think overall it comes down to just respecting other people, reading the room, which, this applies way beyond, actors and sets and stuff like that. I mean, I really got the bulk of my upbringing in this as a stage actor, and the two worlds of live theater and then being on a set with cameras, be it TV or a movie or whatever, they're very different animals. I think more so than anything, you've got to respect other people's processes. And you've got to make sure that your process, whatever it may be, and every actor has their own process. Everybody's different. Everybody approaches things differently. Every production is different. Every character is different. You've got to give them the space to create their character the way they do it. But at the same time, you've got to make sure that your process isn't stampeding all over anybody else's process. I mean, I can think of one time in particular that they used to do these cattle call, like regional stage auditions, and you basically get up and audition in front of a theater, and you might have like 20 or 30. I remember going to one time. There must have been about 30 or 40 different theater companies from all over the Southeast, and you're auditioning for them. But I remember one time in particular, this was living in Miami, and I had to drive one night. I drove several hours in pouring South Florida rain to get to the other coast. Got to the hotel really late, got up the next morning, and it was being held at some regional college. And there's a whole ton of actors. There's probably about 100 or so actors. And honestly, the whole thing was so disorganized, so poorly planned, it was so poorly executed. And I mean, I was just plain tired. And at that point, I didn't have a lot of patience for sloppy organization. We were supposed to go in at one time, but they messed that up. So like the particular group I was in, which is maybe like 10 or 15 people, we all got called in way earlier than we were originally told. So anyway, we're standing off stage and we're standing in a line waiting to, go on and do our 60-second monologue. And there was a guy behind me that I kind of sort of knew him. We, didn't know him, but, we had met a couple times and everything. And at that point, I mean, I was just tired. I was honestly, I can be the most patient person in the world, but I really was not that day. And I was just getting really annoyed at how badly things were, going, and the attitudes we were getting from the organizers. And this guy is in back of me, and he just keeps telling me stupid jokes. And I'm like, and it's like, really, what I just wanted to do was just kind of stand there quietly for 5 minutes and just take some breaths and just center myself. And he just would not shut up. And I'm like, dude, can you just kind of let me just kind of, can we just not talk? I'm just trying to, get some kind of equilibrium going here. And, oh, okay. Hey, did you hear the one about, and it's like, I'm going to punch this guy in the nose so big. And honestly, it's that type of thing, that it's kind of that very self-centered behavior. And I mean, quite frankly, actors can be an interesting bunch sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
There's just this kind of, it's all me.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was going to say that, yeah.
There's so much of that, and quite frankly, you're in the sort of a job where you have to play nice with others.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people want to just have it all be about them, and everybody else is secondary. And it's rude, and it will ultimately screw up the production of whatever you're in if you're not, being respectful of other people. I mean, it's kind of like, Anthony Bourdain said something like, show up on time,
Mm-hmm.
do what work you've agreed to do, respect the people you work with, and things like that. And that applies to it, and it's that applies not only to the kitchens, but that applies to really acting in
Mm-hmm.
any form. It's you.
And life in general.
Well, yeah, life in general, but with, particularly if you're new to this sort of a thing, the whole idea of, like, all of a sudden you've got a bunch of cameras and lights around you and PAs, but going around and touching up your makeup and making sure you don't have like, glow on your nose or whatever, and all this stuff, or or you're standing up on a platform in front of a few hundred people, and they're all like clapping their hands and going, "Oh, good for you." It's very intoxicating, and you can really tend to lose sight of that. It's just, be respectful to other people. I can remember the first time I was ever in background on a TV show.
That first time doing background is such an eye-opener, because a lot of people think it only takes an hour to film an hour show.
Oh, no.
And until you actually are on a set and you're going, it's going to take them the entire week to get, a 45-minute show together. What? That seems crazy.
I remember, especially since on that particular time, one scene had to be in the rain, and they had to bring in the rain machine, and just these gallons upon gallons of water going through this whole, system and everything, and they're simulating this rainstorm and everything, and it was just, it was taken forever, and we were on the set for, I mean, something like 16 hours or 18 hours or something in particular. But we had the guy who was the director of photography, will not mention his name, was one of the rudest SOBs I've ever come in contact with on a set or on a stage. And believe me, that's saying something.
Mm-hmm.
But he was this big dude, and he had apparently won, cinematography awards, and just, and the guy was very good at his job. He was just a miserable human being. And at one point, they had this whole big crowd of us were standing outside, and we all got called in for like the final instructions of the day, or whatever it was. So we're walking, from the outside through this doorway into this place that we were shooting. And there was this one lady who was there, and she was this very sweet lady. She was very nice. She was very petite and skinny, and she was probably in her late 40s, early 50s, but she was just this nice person. And so I remember turning around just in time to see her, and the director of photography, who's this big guy, literally pushing people out of his way, and he literally shoved this woman into a wall. And the guy was like my size. I mean, and I'm like 6'3" and everything. And he just shoved this person. There was no, pardon me, ma'am. There was no excuse me. There was no, not even, I'm going to just, he just literally shoved this woman flat out into a wall. That was, and that, to be honest with you, was very, very eye-opening, because I was like, my God, that was so unnecessary. But it was like, he was the cinematographer, and he won the cinematography awards for this and that and the other thing. And he just thought, because of all that, this behavior's okay, and nobody's going to call me on it, because I am who I am. But, that's an extreme thing. But there's many things that, you can talk about as, if you're on a movie set, don't walk up to the lead characters and ask to take a selfie. That's a big one. That's a good one.
I was working The Resident, and actually I'll tell you, the good parts. This is good examples of who you want to be like. So I was working on The Resident, and actually first 2 times I got called to be on background on The Resident. They didn't use me. And that was a bit of a drive, because that's out to Conyers. So that's like an hour from the house, hour back. But it was paying pretty well. The food was pretty good. And I'm like, okay, I'll bring my laptop. I'll get some work done. And so it's kind of like a BOGO. I'm getting work done for other projects I'm working on, and I'm just sitting here. So first two times I did not get used, but I had a good attitude. I thanked, the assistant directors, even though they were like very, I'm sorry we didn't use. I'm like, oh, that's fine. I got some stuff done. Okay, cool. So then the next time I went on there, I actually ended up being cast as an elite surgeon. And I think the production assistant or the ADs remembered how nice I was when they didn't use me. So I'm like, just sitting with a legal pad, just making some notes at this restaurant that we were supposed to be in. And they said, oh, okay, we want you over at this table. So I go sit down on this table with this other background person, Bruce, that I had worked on some other projects with. And then who sits down, the stand-ins come in, and I'm sitting there and going, Bruce, Malcolm, Greenwood, and then all that. And then there was another stand-in, and I didn't really know the show very well at the time. So I was like, oh, okay. So they leave. And then Bruce Greenwood, who was like the main doctor, Malcolm Jamal Warner, comes in, introduces himself as, hi, I'm Malcolm, shakes my hand, Bruce. Sit down. Lynn Whitfield was the guest star that day. That was her only episode that she did, but she also had won an Emmy in the 90s for the Josephine Baker story. So pretty good. And they could not have been lovelier. There was another person who was also in the cast. And what was interesting was they would chit chat with you. And on a set, there's first team and second team. Second team's your stand-in, first team are your stars. So whenever they're like, okay, cut second team, and second team comes in to sit down to do all the lighting and everything, because you don't want your stars, sitting there and kind of wilting or getting bored. And, it gives people who are background a chance to jump up, and you learn a lot. So the stand-ins came in, and we were all talking, just saying, hey, this seems like a really great set. And Luce, I said, but I did notice that there's one person that just never, hasn't said a word to anybody. And they're like, she only talks to people in the scenes. She jumps up, and the minute they call cut, she is out of there. She doesn't have to be in. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Well, that's fine, as long as she's not yelling at anybody. But I mean, Lynn Whitfield would just turn to me in this scene, and she's like, am I doing okay? And I'm like, ma'am, I feel like I'm getting a master class right now. And so Malcolm and Bruce were like, oh, really? We're master class. And they were just fun. Later that day, I had to go outside and wait. And this was in January, and I didn't have a coat because the costumers hadn't given us a coat. Bruce Greenwood kept on coming up and going, are you okay? And I'm like, yes, I keep on praying for a hot flash, but I never get one when I need one. And he thought that he's like, oh my God, you sound like my wife. That's hilarious. And he was just so sweet, because he would come over and talk to people that were not, and just make sure everybody was okay. Kind of like how I hear that Steve Carell is on a set, he just wants to make sure. So he was amazing. And I went, those are the examples that you want to do. But what was interesting was then the person who never talked to anybody, they just did their scenes and they left. When I had heard later that they were going to be shaking things up, I kind of scratched my head and I went, I wonder if that person's probably not going to be invited back to the next season, because the thing is, even Set Etiquette, and that may have been when you're talking about your process. It may have been her process. I've got to stay in character. I don't want to get distracted. And which is good in a film, but when you're doing a TV show and you're there for week after week, months, maybe even years, you can behave and kind of be standoffish on a movie set for that. But because they want to have an ensemble, what I think can happen is that then the directors, producers, and the other co-stars aren't going to fight for that person, because they're like, hey, I barely talk to them. Maybe once or twice during a scene, we might have a little bit of chit chat, but she's so not wanting to be social. And again, that may have just been her thing. She may have just been very introverted or things like that. But what I would say is, if you do get a chance to do a series and you are going to be on, or, even a guest star or whatever, and it's not your comfort zone, step out of that comfort zone a little bit and do a little bit of chit chat if you see that's what the culture is. Because again, I was on The Resident a few times, but that was just kind of my observation. And I really have to wonder, I don't know this, but the fact that she just came off as a bit antisocial. And when I asked the stand-ins or some other, and people would just volunteer that, they go, oh yeah, she never talks to anybody. She's in and out, just will not talk to anybody. And I'm like, and then also, as far as like stand-ins go, just knowing too what the different roles are. Jamie Lee Sigler, who was on The Sopranos.
Jamie Lynn Sigler.
Yeah, Jamie Lynn. She talked about, she had been theater, and when she went to audition for The Sopranos, she thought it was a musical. So she had a song ready to go. So really didn't understand that. They saw her, went, great, that would be terrific. Well, her first day on this set, she goes, does her thing, and then they're like, okay, cut, second team. And her stand-in comes in. She didn't understand what a stand-in was. So she's like getting really upset, thinking, that girl looks like me. Have I just been replaced? And if there was somebody who could have just gently guided her and went, no, dear, you can go back to your trailer for, they're just rearranging cast, but, just having that little bit of etiquette. And have known and just had somebody or an agent that would have said, okay, I know this is really your first time on a set, just to give you the skinny, this is how things go. You will get a stand-in. But yeah, I did have, when we were doing that episode, I did have a guy that walked up to Lynn Whitfield, and this is a good way to get yourself kicked off set. And he's like, Miss Whitfield, I want to let you to know that right now you are talking to your future co-star, because I am going to manifest that. And she was very gracious. She's like, oh, that's wonderful. Are you taking classes? Oh yeah. And I mean, she was just lovely, but she and I both kind of looked at each other like, and one of the ADs came over to him, and he was dismissed for the day. But it was like, but exactly to your point about going up and taking selfies, that's a problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of, you really kind of have to read the room.
Yes.
And that, particularly if you're new at it, that can be difficult to do, because, you're excited to be there, and you're probably nervous, and and all of that. But I mean, every set's going to be different. One thing in particular I remember is be careful about once you get your costume. Some costumers do not want you to eat anything while you were in costume, or drink anything. That's one thing. And I remember a costumer actually getting extremely irate about that one time, and I understand why. One thing,
and those are good questions to ask, is, are you okay if I, if it's more period costume, a lot of times if you're just wearing business clothes or whatever, but that's a good question to ask.
Yeah, that's, you find out about what the policies are about that. Be on time. Be on time. I don't care. Just be on time. That is one thing I will say. My mom and dad and a couple of important teachers in my days of youth really drummed it into my head. If you're not 10 minutes early, then you're 5 minutes late. Be on time, period.
And don't be, and a lot of times it does take time. You could get there at 6:30. And a lot of times my call time will be 6:30. I may not go on set until 8:30, 9 o'clock, 9:30. Sometimes it's 11:30 in the afternoon. You're sitting there for 5 hours, which is set etiquette. Bring things to work on. If you have a laptop, even if you have just a legal pad and you're making notes, etiquette as far as phone goes. I mean, recently
that's another thing.
We talked, you had Deadpool, and so there was a leak off the Deadpool. Yeah, that did not go over well. So, particularly if you are working on something, that is particularly superhero wise. I've worked on one Marvel movie, and one thing that they have you do with your cell phone is they'll give you a little sticker to put over that so you can't take pictures. They'll have you sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. The assistant director seemed like they were pretty cool. So I'm like, well, and you can't say this, you can't say this. And I'm like, well, here are my 3 options. Let me throw these out to you. Can I say that Rosebud's the sled, Soylent Green is people, or Norman Bates is his own mother? And he's like, I'm a Hitchcock fan. Norman Bates is his own mother. You can say that about this movie. And I'm like, cool. And that's just because all those are well over 50, 60, maybe even 70 years old. You don't want to give out anything. Spoiler alerts.
There's a lot of times they really don't, depending upon the project, they really don't want you talking about it until it comes out. And
then at that point, you can say, hey, I had a great experience. Even if you didn't have a great experience, maybe don't. That's why, when I was talking, I didn't necessarily say who that particular person was. I worked on another film, and then, also because you were talking about crews having attitudes, and an assistant director, and, we were in a cemetery, and, he wanted us to go walking a certain way. And so me and this, other lady said, oh, of course, whatever you need, we'll make it happen for you. Thank you. And he just looked at me and he goes, don't patronize me. I'm from the North. Which then my etiquette back to him was, well, you're in the South now, sugar. We're going to be nice to you whether you like it or not. So, yeah, I probably got cut out of that scene. But sometimes you do have people, crew members. And, for me, again, and if you are a filmmaker, look at how sets are run. Look at the dues. Be Bruce Greenwood. Don't be that AD. Costumer. I was working on another movie, and so she was trying to get couples together, and this one woman had salt and pepper hair, and she turns to her and goes, Grandma, grandson, you guys are together. Well, that woman did not appreciate being called grandma, because I think she was only in her 40s and probably old enough just to be the guy's mother. She got very upset, and the costumer was just so obnoxious. So this probably was not good set etiquette, but I'm like, I will bet you if I start doing little miming things, it will irritate her and she probably won't pick me. And sure enough, she didn't pick me. So I got to go back and work on the stuff that I wanted to work on. But I just went, and so I'm like, as somebody leaned in and went, what is the name of the costumer? Got that and went, okay, noted. If that name ever comes across my desk, I am not using them. And that's the thing too, to me, if I were a big producer or studio, and I mean studio heads or whatever, but go anonymously, you could go in as background, no one will know who you are, and just see how things are being run. Because a lot of times you are literally a fly on the wall, and the PAs and the ADs are not going to be as guarded around the background people as they are other. And sometimes you can really get the skinny on a production and go, yikes. But again, that is for your ears only. It is not to go out on social media.
We are, when it comes to social media, I am so glad I did not grow up, especially in my teenage years, having Instagram or X or Twitter or Meta or whatever. Any of that stuff. I'm so glad I did not have that. I would have made a complete idiot of myself. But that's one thing, you do have to be very careful. It's like, yes, you want to share with people what you're doing and what adventure you're on today and what are you learning from this experience. And that's all great. But you got to be extremely careful what you share on social media when it comes to this stuff, because sometimes these producers do not want you talking about it. So, better to just kind of keep it to yourself. And then whenever the production is and it comes out, and then you can talk about things, fine, do it then. But you can get yourself into a whole peck of trouble doing that. And I will say this, just, generally speaking, I would say two things here. You've got to be very, as I said, you do have to be respectful of other people's processes and not go bugging them. But, and I don't mean to pick on method actors. I mean to pick on actors who think they're method actors and don't understand the first thing about the method, which means like, just like living in your character and just getting so wrapped up into it to where the line of demarcation between you and your character becomes extremely blurred. First of all, that's not psychologically healthy, but second, that can be one of the most rudest sucking air out of the room behaviors you can get when your process is all of this stuff that is just bugging other people. And when I say bugging, that's a really nice way to put it.
You're being very kind.
I'm being very kind. I go back to this one example of this one student we had who brand new to the stuff. And she got in somewhere she heard about, method acting and all this type of thing. And she's just going on and on and on about how into her character she is. And then she starts talking about, I'm into my character so much and I'm so mad that I'm going to go beat up my boyfriend. Stop it right now. It's like whatever your process is, if you start going into that sort of headspace, you're not only going to screw up your own performance, you're going to screw up the performances of a lot of other people because your method is just, bull into a china closet, tap dancing all over everybody else's processes. And that's not cool. The other thing I'm going to say is stage parents.
Yes.
And let me just say this now, theater's one thing, and when you're in big productions, that's one thing. But particularly when you're on a movie set or a TV set, there's a lot of moving parts to that you don't see, that you have no idea what's going on. And to start walking up to production assistants and all these people who, good production assistants, I mean, they work their butts off. They put up with a lot of crap. And
always be nice to your PAs.
Yeah, always be nice.
And your assistant directors. And just say thank you.
Do not walk up to these people and going, are you guys going to use me or what? Come on. Don't start that crap. Don't listen. If you're going to start that, I can tell you right now, it's going to get around and you are not going to get used. And if you're there through an agent, they're probably going to go back to the agent and go, this person was a real a-hole about it, and you are not going to get used. And stage parents. Okay, look, we've got kids. I understand, they're the most wonderful people in the world. They're the most talented, because they're my kids, of course. And some of these stage parents, start, and I've seen this one a few times, that they start getting all irate and pushy about, my kid and this and this and this. It's like, back off. Dial it down. Don't do that. Don't do that. You are going to screw yourself so badly. I think if you have not read this, and this for some people could be a very difficult book to read, but as, Jeanette McCurdy, I'm glad my mom died is the title of the book, and it's just about her growing up and her mother being this like stage mother on steroids, and how many people she alienated, and how much more difficult things were made because of this. You got to know just when to push and how hard. And you got to know when to dial it down and shut up and step back. And you have to develop that sensitivity, and you have to behave accordingly with it. And, I understand you want to advocate for yourself. You want to advocate for your kids. Of course you do. Of course you do. But that's where so many people just step over a line and they alienate people. They wind up getting a bad reputation pretty quickly. It can happen pretty quickly if you walk onto these sets and you're going to start behaving like a prima donna. I mean,
nobody really has time for that.
I've known people. I've worked with people in the opera world who, with the same production, we had people. I mean, they before and since I'd worked with them, they've been at the Metropolitan Opera, they've been at Sydney Opera House. I mean, these are like big people in the world of opera, and they were some of the nicest, most cool people just to work with, and they're on stage in front of 3,000 people singing opera, but when they come off, they're like, you're a normal human being, somebody that you would sit down. That's the way you have to be, because I've also seen people in the same world be as big of a pompous ass as you can ever imagine. And it's just, you need to develop that temperament, and you need to remember also, not only do you have to have that temperament in yourself, but acting is a sort of a thing. It is a communal thing. You act in group. Actors come together in groups, and even if it's a one-person show, you've still got stage managers, you've got ushers, you've got ticket takers, you've got lighting people, you've got sound people, you've got props people. It is a collaborative community, and you have to respect that. And not only do you have to have that behavior coming out of yourself, but you need to expect the good behavior coming from the people that you're working with. Even if you have zero experience and they have way more than you do, it doesn't make any difference. If you're not being treated respectfully, you need to get out of there.
And that, and again, that goes both ways. If you're not being treated with respect, and then if you're not treating other people with respect. I was working on another movie, and there was a mom. She had her 2 kids. I think they all had been booked for background through central casting. Well, there's like the catering table, and then there's kind of like the table that's got, plates and stuff like that. Well, she decides she's going to set up camp at the table where people are supposed to be silverware. She moves it over. She's sitting right there, kind of like holding court for her and her kids. And so then the caterer says, I'm sorry, ma'am, you're going to have to move. Well, she got super ticked off about that, kind of mouthed off a little bit, then went over, found another place, and people kind of moved because, like, I don't want to be around that here. You can have this big back table. And I think her attitude was such that, and this film was supposed to be school kids and stuff like that. Her kids didn't get used because they were just sitting there going, this mom's just going to be all sorts of problems, and she's so they didn't get used. I remember, like, checking out, getting my costume, and just hearing her talk to someone. The next time they send me something, I'm putting not available. And it's like, I think I speak for most everybody here when we say thank you. Don't be available anymore.
Chances are you're not going to get called back very
You're
often
probably not going to be called back. But, people just assume that you're going to get the standard rich and famous contract being on a set. It doesn't. It takes a really, really long time. I've used the example of Eric Stonestreet from Modern Family. He had auditioned for Kevin for The Office, and then and he had been in LA for like 10 years. Nothing was really happening. John Krasinski had been waiting tables, and now, he's a director and he's a writer, but the learning of the process and learning the ropes is so valuable. So don't ever sit there and go poo-poo because it's a small part or it's background. Background, basically, you're getting paid to learn all the different points there. So don't look at it as it's beneath me. I was coaching one person. We were coaching somebody on Slate, and there was a young lady that in her Slate said, I will only take starring and maybe supporting roles. And she had like no experience. And I went,
yeah.
And she eventually dropped out of the program, but I was like, you learn. I would never take background, and I'm like, you learn a lot with background,
especially if you have no experience.
Yeah, I said, if you were Meryl Streep, I would get it, but I think even Meryl would know not to say I'm only going to take starring or supporting roles. Guys, she's been around for a minute. But yeah, guys, just treat people with kindness. with good manners. And again, those things can come back. Like I said, I didn't get mad at the people at the resident for not using me the first 2 days I was there. I was just really quiet. I wasn't jumping or whatever. And then I was kind of doing my same thing. And they went, her. She's nice. She said thank you to us. And then I got sat at a table with some really amazing actors and got, to talk to them for, a whole day. And then, next time we were also at the High Museum walking back. So, just be cognizant of that. I will say one other thing. When you are working on set, speaking of etiquette and food, make sure that you're going to the right place for food, because sometimes they might have a separate catering for background or just, people that have one-liners or guest stars versus the big crew and all that. Just make sure that you ask so that you're not going to the wrong place to eat. But a lot of times, some sets are great. I did work on one set that just had I would bring my own food. And that would be another suggestion, is bring your own food if you're not sure, because I worked on one show that consistently had cold breakfast burritos to the point where I'm like, people are going to get sick on these. So I just bring my banana, some peanut butter crackers, granola bars, and I just keep those. If you're not sure, ask. And then just say please and thank you and show good manners, because sometimes that really sets you apart.
Please and thank you, and
I appreciate your help. Yeah.
Treating people the way that you would want to be treated. I know it sounds really simple. It goes so far.
It does.
It goes so far. Stick around in acting long enough, you will meet a cast of characters. And a lot of times it's possible that there's more drama going on behind the scenes than there are in the actual play or the movie. And one thing, don't complain.
Oh yeah.
Don't, I can remember somebody back in the day, we're on set, we're waiting, and it was, we're waiting. And this one person was just, I don't think they could open their mouth and say one positive thing. It's like, and it was just like, we have to be in a group with this person who does not know how to shut up the complaining. And it just went on and on and on for hours until somebody else in the group went, "Will you shut up?" And then it was like, "Oh, you speak to me that way." And I just remember looking at the person and who told the guy to shut up. And I was like, "Thank you."
And there's a lack of self-awareness there. But yeah, again, that's why I like keeping little pads. So I might make little notes to myself, and because I write in cursive, younger people usually can't read it. So I make little notes. Don't post on social media how bored you are and things like that. Those things will come back to get you. But just being good and kind on set.
Even if you're just playing in a group of people mouthing off about it, and even if the production is an absolute mess, don't harp on it. Don't don't stand in the back of everything just trash talking and crap talking people. Don't do it. That'll get back.
It will.
Another thing that I wanted to say, and I've heard this one too, if you have like a side business or a side hustle or whatever, I have seen people come into rehearsals or come onto sets and try to sell people their insurance policies or their whatever product they're peddling, and they use it as an opportunity to start sales pitching people on something that has absolutely nothing to do with the project. Don't do that. Don't do that. I don't care. I've seen people do that, and you will get a reputation very quickly for that. And also just, if there's anything you're being asked to do that you're not comfortable with, and it's sort of like when you're on set and you're working, and then you sort of get this, "Oh, by the way, we need you to do something," and it's like, I did not agree to that. And that is making me really uncomfortable. Then don't do it. And I will say also, it just, graciousness is I can just, an example I had was back in the day when I had my own theater company. I was casting a play, one young woman comes in to audition, and she did a good job. And I was like, I want to cast her. So a day or two after the fact, I called her and said, hey, nice job. I would like to cast you in such and such part. And then all of a sudden I got this, oh, well, I'm going to be auditioning a lot. And if I get cast in something else, I will just have to leave your production. And I went, okay, well, then you don't have to worry about it. Then I'll just go cast somebody else. And all of a sudden it's like, and it's like, no, I mean, I can't have that. If it's not going to work for you to be in my production,
yeah,
then that's not going to work for me either. Then don't worry about it. And then she's like, but. I was like, no, you just know that you said what you said.
Mm-hmm.
If you're suddenly feeling like you stuck your foot into your mouth, you did.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that's going to continue. That behavior is going to continue through the whole thing. And something else. Don't start, unless there's some magical moment that comes along, don't start trying to ask people out on dates. Don't get into the risque. Don't get into the double entendre.
The best, as far as contact info, and on the short film that I did, people were just asking for people's Instagram handles and things like that. So you can ask for people's social media.
That's fine. Basically, you've got to trust each other as actors. You've got to trust your director. You've got to trust your crew. Your actors have got to trust each other. And if you start doing that stuff, particularly, I mean, it's never been okay. It's never been cool. But, just as far as doing anything, you think you're being like, racy and cool, and, you think that person is kind of hot looking. So let me, start, dropping the double entendres and the risque talk. Okay. Do not do that.
Don't.
It's not, particularly in, this day and age, and all the Harvey Weinstein, all that other horrific, horrible stuff that has happened to people, and they've been violated in that way. If somebody ever did that and I was in charge, they would be ended immediately. I will say, and the most extreme example I remember, and I think you'll remember, there was this acting workshop back in the day.
Oh yeah.
And it was just this, like, I think it was like Wednesday nights. It was just this open class, and I mean, a bunch of people would come to this thing. You'd be like, 20, 30, sometimes more people would come into this thing, and there were all these improv exercises and this and that. And there was this one guy who I knew. I'd been in a couple of shows with him. He was an attorney by day. And he just was, he's the kind of a lawyer that gives lawyers bad names. But just the way it was set up, you sort of had this like little like platform riser that people would get up on, and the chairs were out front. And then there was sort of these set walls. And there was doors in them and stuff like that. And then there was like this little backstage area, and it wasn't, it was just this tiny, dark little place. And so we're doing this giant like group improv scene of like everybody is just improving willy-nilly all at once. And yes, it was as big of a mess as you can imagine. But this one guy got some girl back there, and he apparently
attempted sexual assault.
So he attempted, and this was, in the context of his character. Oh, BS, guys. And so we're all improvising, and all of a sudden we hear this young lady start screaming, and I mean screaming, to where it's like the whole thing stopped. And this teacher, basically what she did is everybody else had to sit down, and she got the two of them up there, and it's like, we need to talk about what happened, and why did you do that? And why did you think that was okay? It's like, well, it was my character, and this. Okay, no. And it was an extremely uncomfortable situation. But I mean, to be honest with you, the guy needed to be banned. Period. Because he's going to do it again. If he does something like this and there's not some kind of serious repercussions, he's going to do it again.
Exactly. Yes.
And I don't care, man, woman, I don't care who, I don't care what. Nobody treats anybody else like that. And then you're going to use the excuse of, it's my character.
No.
guys, I've got words right here that I will not use in this particular format. But that, and just how that instance got sort of like, oh, I guess it was okay if it was this character. And it was like, I want to kick somebody in the teeth over that so bad. That gets me so angry.
So don't, and there's any number of things, as far as bad instances, but we're going to go ahead and wrap up. But what I would say is, when you're on set, when in doubt, be polite, be nice,
always
say thank you to everybody, whether your fellow background people, your fellow guest stars, the PAs, the ADs, the costumers, the caterers, all those people. I had a delicious omelet when I was working Will Trent, and the young caterer that made it, Nick, I said, thank you, Nick. You are a true artist. This is wonderful. And it made his day. And I'm like, that's all it takes, is just, being kind and just letting people know that you appreciate them, because a lot of times they may not be getting that. And then you stand out because you are the polite person and you are being good and kind.
Well, keep in mind also is that, when some people go on a set, they may be having all manner of just self-confidence issues. They may be so self-conscious. They may, and just the smallest things, just, paying somebody just a sincere compliment, and you just watch their face light up, and all of that self-doubt and all of that anxiety and all that stuff goes away when you can just share that little polite, sincere. Don't go blowing smoke up anybody's rear end, but just, if you say that, it's just amazing how you just watch all of that self-doubt and anxiety just dissipate.
It melts away.
It does. And you'd be surprised. Movie sets are very different from other working environments.
Yes.
But you can really make somebody's day on or off set with something like that. With something sincerely kind and beneficial to the person.
And specific.
Yeah.
So again, thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate it. And we will be back next time. I have a feeling we could probably do a few episodes on etiquette.
Yeah. And it's just, and not just, but, then there's all of the positives. This is kind of like don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But there's so many things that you can do that just really make you stand out. And word will get around. You can actually wind up getting a lot more work when they go, this person was really great to work with.
They were on time. They were professional. They were kind, and they listened, and they gave, they were there. Because as Max and I have both worked as directors and producers, those are the actors that you work with. Again, it's the actors that are like, no, I'm not going to move lights. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. And it's like, okay, well, thank you.
I'm not going to say, and I mean, just last things, know your lines. There's a certain thing going on in the acting world right now. It's like, you don't need to know your lines. Know your lines. Know your lines.
And know your partner's lines, too. That is a podcast for another day. But again, thank you, guys. You have a great rest of your week, rest of your day, and we will talk to you next time.
Be well, my friends. Until next time.
We appreciate you guys tuning in, and keep in mind that you can catch us on our social media, Creative Actors Lab on Instagram and Facebook, and by the same name on YouTube. And for more on what we do, you can go to our website,
creativeactorslab.com, all one word. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, makeart.org. Much love until next time.